I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
Okay.
All right?
Do you
Stop.
want to take a break?
No, it's all right.
You're good. Do you want more coffee?
No, thanks.
Okay. Are you good?
Yeah.
Okay. Tom, I understand that you were with Pan Am for about 40 years?
40 years.
40 years. So when you first came on board, it was the flying boats. But then some changes happened over those 40 years.
Oh, yeah, I should say.
Like what?
Well, 1946, I was on the last flight of a Pan American flying boat. After we landed in San Francisco, it went into war surplus. And from that point on, Pan American was flying land planes only, because during the war, airfields had been based all the way across the Pacific, so we didn't need boats anymore. Now we could fly land planes, which were much more efficient. So we rapidly went through a series of land planes, the DC-4, the DC-6s, Stratocruiser. And in 1958, we got the first 707 jets. And in 1970, we got the magnificent 747. So in 24 years from the last flight of one of these airplanes to the first flight of a 747 in only 24 years. And that's really an amazing, rapid development of the aviation world. And as I told you earlier, that was 1970, the first flight of a 747. And that was 43 years ago, and the Boeing company is still building the 747. Some of the people in Seattle spent their whole career building 747 for 43 years. That's amazing.
Now, was that the last kind of plane that was in service when you retired?
Yeah, the 747.
Now, to go back to the beginning of the story, tell me, when you graduated from engineering school, were there any jobs? I mean, what was the job situation like?
Well, the war was on, and I graduated from the Boeing School of Aeronautics at Oakland Airport. And the school was owned by United Airlines, and they offered me a job as a flight engineer. And at first I took that job, and at the end of a month, I didn't like it there. And my roommates and I heard that Pan American was hiring flight engineers. So my two roommates came out here on Thursday, and they were hired. And they came back to the house we lived in and told me. So the next morning, bright and early, I came out here and went down into down this basement to the personnel office and applied for a job as a flight engineer. And I filled out the forms. And Mr. Winchester, who ran the office here, went through it, and he said, well, this looks fine, but he said, I just hired 2 engineers yesterday, and we don't need any more. But he said, I'll keep this application. And I thought, oh yeah, maybe so, maybe not. So I went upstairs and I asked the receptionist where the chief flight engineer was. She said, oh, it's up on the 3rd floor. So I went all the way up to the 3rd floor and knocked on the door of the chief flight engineer. And so I talked to him for half an hour. And finally he said, well, okay, go on back downstairs. And he called downstairs to Mr. Winchester. He said, I'm sending Tom Kewen down. I want you to hire him as a flight engineer starting Monday. So I came back down, and Mr. Winchester was rather embarrassed, and he said, the communication in the 3rd floor in the basement isn't very good. But they hired me. And I was 20 years of age, wet behind the ears, and I couldn't really figure out why he hired me. So years later, I asked the chief flight engineer, why the hell did you hire me? And he said, well, he said, you seem pretty bright. But he said, I needed one more guy to fill up the class that was starting on Monday. And I figured I could always fire you. So what they did with the war on, everybody was being drafted in the Army. So Pan American got this contract to work for the Navy. So we were all sworn into the Navy. I went to San Francisco and did the thing and became a member of the United States Navy. And then I was given orders to inactive duty with Pan American. And that kept me out of the Alameda Draft Board. So they couldn't touch me. And so I stayed in the Navy Reserve all through the war. Now, in addition to that, as long as you stayed with Pan American, why, everything was fine. But if Pan American didn't like you, if you didn't do a very good job, and they fired you, the next day you'd be on active duty in the Navy. So we worked hard. It worked, yeah, indeed.
Well, before the war, before we joined World War II, did you come to the fair when it was here?
Oh, I came very often. I lived in Modesto, and so frequently through the summer, one or two buddies and I would get in my Model A Roadster and drive from Modesto. Took about an hour and a half to get here in those days. And we'd spend all day here seeing all the wonders of the exposition and then drive back to Modesto in time for dinner.
Can you tell us, I'm not sure how much more time we have, but maybe one of your favorite memories and stories of the fair?
Oh, I think one of the most memorable things I thought was the General Electric building. They had all of these wonderful new inventions that General Electric made. There was an electric kitchen, sun lamps with mercury in them. And that was very interesting. And of course, the Aquacade. One of the performers with the Aquacade went in the Navy when the war started and became a pilot in the Navy. And at the end of the war, he came to work for Pan American as a pilot. But he was here, a star of the Aquacade during the fair. Yeah, it was a great fair. Yeah, very good. Hot dogs and fresh corn on the cob, and milkshakes.
Did you sneak into Sally Rand's nude ranch?
I didn't see Sally Rand's thing, no.
No?
No.
You must have been the only kid.
No, I was a little young for that.
Oh, okay.
I wish I had. But I remember Zoe Landis. We would see her around her in her costume all the time, yeah.
Right.
And I saw her here a couple of years ago.
Right.
Yeah. She's still around.
Oh, yeah, she's a great fan of us, and we are a great fan of hers.
And after the war, she became a pilot herself.
You know, I did read that. Yeah, I'd forgotten.
Yeah, she was a pilot, and she's still around. Yeah.
Did you talk about the photograph behind us? Did you just mention briefly?
Yeah. These guys, I knew all of these guys. They were based in Honolulu. They're all Hawaiian Chinese, and they were one crew, all Chinese. There was a maintenance crew. We had crews that did the maintenance. So when the China Clipper came in, this one crew would have the job of doing the maintenance on it, inspecting everything, making repairs. But all of these guys worked together, and they were a great bunch of guys. And one of them, the chief of the group, his name was Lou, and he was with me at Boeing School of Aeronautics, learning to be a mechanic. So he came to Pan American the same time I did, and he came hired on as a mechanic, and I hired on as a flight engineer. But he was the chief of this crew.
Now,
They're a great bunch.
the man that we interviewed a while ago, I think is actually the man in that picture who's wearing the cap.
The one in the middle?
Yeah. Do you recognize him at all?
No, I don't. It was a long time ago,
Could
maybe.
you point to that guy for one more time?
Yeah.
Point to that guy.
Can you point one more time?
This one right here, yeah.
That's, I think he's the head of the crew.
Yeah, one more time, like slowly. Point.
Right there, yeah.
Who's this guy?
And I remember this guy, Lee was his name. Yeah. Tad. Yeah. Great bunch.
So would each flying boat have its own crew
Yep.
mechanics crew? Or would they work on all of the clippers?
They worked on all the airplanes, but every day they'd be assigned an airplane to work on. Because in Honolulu, we also had all of these Navy planes, that the Navy, 4-engine Navy Coronado airplanes that were given to us by the Navy. So we had 8 of those airplanes flying through there. And so, there might be 4 or 5 airplanes at Hawaii at the same time. So these crews were spread around.
Did you get a chance to tell the story about how you met your wife and what her career was?
Well, in 1946, the base at San Francisco decided finally that they were going to have stewardesses. And this girl, Hope Parkinson, had started flying as a stewardess for Pan American out of Miami in 1944. She came from Sacramento, so she was out here on a vacation seeing her family, and she stopped at San Francisco and said, we've been hearing rumors that you're going to hire stewardesses. And they told her, yes, we just decided we're going to. And she said, well, I'd like to transfer here from Miami. So they called the Miami office, and they said, okay, you can transfer next month. So then she was the first stewardess to ever fly across the Pacific. And of course, I had known her when I was 14 years of age. She used to stay with my family up at Twain Harte up in the Sierras. So I started courting her, and it took me 4 years to finally agree to marry me. By that time, she was the chief stewardess, and she was having a wonderful time doing all kinds of things. But we finally decided, okay, we'll get married.
Is that?
You have a picture?
Yeah, the picture of her. Let's see that.
No, where is that? Let's see. Oh, I've got it here. I think, no,
It can't be too far away.
it's in that envelope.